So, just back from the Mid-Atlantic BDR, got back late last night, thought I would do just a quick review before I take the bike apart of basically the setup, the bike, all that jazz. You know, there's obviously a lot of content online about the 300 Rally, you know, probably one of the more famous bikes in the current moto world from Itchy Boots' travels. I bought this in January with some aspirations of doing, you know, some dual sport riding, having come mostly from big bike world, GS, RT kind of things, but I did not have a lot of dirt experience. And so kind of just wanted to share how the bike worked out for me, how the gear worked out for me, and basically, you know, this was my first real dirt excursion. You know, I took the rawhide class in the spring on the 1200 GS, but I, you know, had never really done a whole lot of dirt ever. So this is kind of perspective of a dirt novice with a little bit of training, tons of street experience, but mostly big bike experience, at least in the last decade probably. And so this whole thing was pretty new to me, so I thought I would kind of just share how it worked out. And yeah, so I think what I had done with my last GS tour was kind of a front to back, and we'll just kind of see how things go. Actually, I guess before we get into that, overall, honestly, I mean, for someone of my skill level and the types of things I wanted to do, there's very little that I could ask for more on this. I mean, I think that some of it is obvious, like 27 horsepower or whatever it is very, very tricky on long stretches. But that said, I did 500 miles yesterday, including a 400-mile interstate section on Interstate 81. You know, almost wide open throttle, 70 miles an hour, pegged 7,000 RPM for like 5 hours straight, 6 hours straight at night. There's a lot I would change, but it did it. And so, and it also did the whole, almost the whole BDR. I did some of it on another bike, but so it kind of did everything. It would not be my bike of choice for doing long highway days, but it can do it. And so for the price and for what what you get out of this, the fuel range, the off-road ability, and like some ability to do streets, you know, like I think everybody else that's talked about this bike, I think like, you know, you'd kill for 10 more horsepower, 15 more horsepower, but it is what it is. And with more power usually comes more weight or more complexity or lower reliability, I guess, or whatever. So, and by that, I mean kind of like, obviously people talk about the KTM 690 in this class. I haven't ridden the Enduro, I've ridden the SMC. Yes, like I would love to have that motor in this. And really that's, I guess, what the KTM 690 Enduro kind of is, this class, but a hell of a lot more powerful. And yes, it would have been a dream, but you know, premium gas and not a Honda. So, however, I do want that bike. But yeah, so I've kind of fallen in love with this bike. I've been calling it the little engine that could, because it just kind of does whatever you throw at it. There are drawbacks, certainly. We'll kind of go over some of those, but I'm very happy with this, especially coming from giant GSs for the last, you know, period of my life. And look, I still have the GSA. I would have ridden it probably on this trip, but as a solo rider, something small that I can pick up, something extremely forgiving, this was great. So let me just kind of go over it from front to back and see how it goes. So I guess, you know, the first thing I'll just, since it's absolutely in the front of this, is the tires. I know people have said that like, oh, you can ride on the stock tires or whatever, and if you're doing mostly dirt trails, nothing too technical, blah, 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 they're fine. They're not. They're just not. They're terrible. The stock tires are terrible. Um, so these are the Mitas EO7s. Mitas, I don't know how you say it. Um, these tires are a dream. They are a dream on the street. They're a dream on the type of trail riding I've done. You know, these are. This is a 90-90 21 in the front, and a 130-80-18 in the rear. That's slightly off of the stock size. I don't even remember what they are. The stock tires, and I really thought this was an issue with the bike or the suspension. The stock tires on the highway were actually scary over like 60, and I just thought it was the suspension being really light on the front end. It was the tires. I could not have ridden this at 70 miles an hour for as long as I did on the stock tires, and on these it was fine. And I haven't changed the suspension, so that's the change, and it was fine. So throw the stock tires out. They are the worst, and I love these. They were extremely stiff. I couldn't get them on. I had to take them to a shop to get them mounted. I think it's probably fine if I have to change a tire, you know, knock on wood. But you know, using tire levers, the tire levers I had, I just couldn't get them on. I think I can get one bead off if I need to change a tube. I hope. I should probably check that. But anyway, they're great. They did everything. I mean, on the Mid-Atlantic BDR, there was nothing on that, and I didn't do the expert sections, again, being alone and kind of a novice, but everything else was fine. Even some of, as some guy ride says, the terrace gravel, they were fine, the terrace gravel. I mean, the terrace gravel is sketchy, but it was fine. Some of the hill climbs, the wet leaves, and then even like on the street sections, I mean, so many great twisty roads. I also diverted a little bit at the end and did a little diversion on, what do they call it, Back of the Dragon down there in Virginia. I did the BDR north to south, but it was a dream. It really was. Again, could have used a little bit more power, but the tires were great. So highly recommend these. And if the sizing that I chose, which was just really what was available, was anything, you know, I would do this again in a heartbeat. If I do more technical trails and it doesn't work out, we'll see. But you know, I've got now probably 1,500 miles on these tires, and they're great. You know, next from front to back is the screen. There is, and I put this, you know, the Puig deflector thing on here. The screen is kind of a disaster, and I can't say it's the screen's fault, but there is a roar that really feels like it comes around the sides of the screen, not the top, so the deflector didn't do much. It really seems like the roar comes from over here, but there's nothing you can do about that because of the mirrors. And the roar is just on the sides. I've got a Schubert C4 Pro that, you know, wind tunnel tested, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm really, really sensitive about my hearing. And there's nothing I could do about the roar, which is a bummer. It actually seemed better, like standing up, there's no roar, so it really seems like the roar is coming off of the screen, which is unfortunate. I know that Itchy Boots has ridden, obviously, 30,000 Ks with the stock screen with no deflector or anything like that, and she seems to do fine. I mean, I wear earplugs, I wear 33s. I still get ringing, which is scary. So I don't know. I don't know what to do about the screen. I almost would rather have none, but then where I mount, kind of, I mean, this bar, which I don't think is on the stock or the regular CRF non-rally, because this is the, you know, this is the rally ABS model. The bar is really nice. I actually took, and I think it was from Peak Motorcycles, his advice of you can basically mount a ram mount here on the left using the stock holes. I did that and put a medium arm and then the X grip, which has actually been really great, and it puts the phone right kind of where you need it. You know, I don't like to run GPSs because I just hate I hate them. I hate the tech in them. Not in the tech, I hate the UI. in them. But in this, you know, I use Locus Map on my Google Pixel, and it was great. Besides the phone getting really dusty, it was great. What else here? You can't really see it on the video from over there, I guess, but the I mounted, and I bought this from, I don't know, one of those CRF stores, but cigarette lighter adapter that mounts right here, and it plugs into the factory harness. Yes, like you can run a 12 volt to the battery or whatever, but I wanted to use this harness spot here and have something that was a little bit kind of factory-ish. That was great. Actually worked out really well. Besides the fact that the USB plug inside it, which is a separate thing, died yesterday, but the plug itself was fine. The cover is a little bit janky. I don't know how it would hold up in rain, but I got the I always thought it was Acerbis. Some people say Acerbis. I don't know. The Rally Pro handguards. I didn't drop the bike, so I don't know how they would hold up. They didn't. They're a little bit short, so the levers actually stick out. So the levers are below them. So I I think it would still take the hit here. So I think this would be fine. But those are fine. I wish these sections were a little bit bigger, just from a coldness standpoint, because it got really, really chilly last night, but whatever. What else front to back? The Outback Motortek bars, again, I didn't drop it, so I've had it laying on the ground and they're fine. This mount point. So I'm killing the audio for this portion just because I was being a little bit harsh on the Outback Motortek crash bars, and I didn't really like what I was saying, but essentially I was kind of just expressing a little bit of concern about the front mount point being on like the headlight assembly and not being sure how it would react in a crash. I did not crash, and obviously Rollie has crashed so many times with those on and it seemed totally fine. That's why the audio is out here. These are the Sedici, I don't know what they are, waterproof bags. I have them like completely jury-rigged, Velcroed to these bars because I could not figure out, even all the straps they come with, I couldn't figure out a good mount. But my weird Velcro straps held. This is basically snacks and water, and on the other side I keep my rain pants. They were great, and having that extra little bit of storage in the front is actually really, really nice, especially for snacks. This is the Nelson Rigg tank bag. This is, I think, the Adventure line, and I think it's the medium size or the large size. I think they make a smaller one. This is actually great. It expands, which is nice. It has a couple of zipper pouches on either side. I have earplugs and then some tool stuff like gauges and stuff in this side. But this was good. The only thing, it's not waterproof, which is annoying, so you got to carry a cover, but it held up. It was good, and I thought it was going to be too big, even for standing and stuff, so I had the tiny one, which I hated. It was just too small. So this actually was fine, even for standing. What else from front to back? Pegs. The pegs actually were fine. I just took the rubber out. I don't think I would need bigger pegs. I have big feet, and I could stand. I mean, I was in the Blue Ridge Parkway yesterday. I stood for, I mean, my butt was just getting sore, so I just stood for probably a good hour standing on the pegs. It was fine. Why is my butt sore? The stock seat sucks. This is a seat concept seat. I'm not sold. I don't know. This is the regular one. Maybe I should have bought the XL. I don't know. I'm not that big, so I didn't think I needed the XL. And when I sit down, I feel like if I had the XL, I wouldn't be using the extra width. So I don't know. People swear by these. It's my first seat concept seat. I didn't think it was that much better than stock. And I tried to put one of those like 3D mesh pads on top of it that actually made it worse. So I removed that. But I don't know. The seat was really the limiting factor in my comfort yesterday, because yesterday was by far the longest sitting day that I did. But the rest of it, you know, the seat was fine. But I think the stock seat would have been fine too for most of what I did. So I don't know. Jury's out on this. Maybe I should do the XL. I might contact their customer service and just see if there's anything I can do. But you know, the seat was nice. Like, there is padding here to grab with your knees, which is good. So yeah, I don't know. Jury's out on this one. Yellow bag, Wolfman bag. I love this thing. I always love this thing. I take this on all my trips. You know, this is the first dirt trip I did with it. It definitely gathers dust a lot. So that was kind of like if you mount it and then put your earplugs in, your hands are filthy. But I think that would be anything. That's not about the bag itself. That's just the nature of the beast. This is basically my hotel bag. Um, and it's like, I don't know why it's so big, but you know, it's really just a pair of flip-flops, a pair of shoes, my toiletries, and then some clothes. And I have my chargers and stuff in here on the top. So I don't know why it's so big. I actually travel, I think, pretty light and minimal. So this looks like a huge setup, especially for this bike. I don't know. But anyway, love that bag. Worked for me, and it's a great backrest. Without back support for me on long trips, my lower back just dies. So perfect. Um, the Enduristan panniers, the bags are fine. They're waterproof. They held up. I burned off the mount when I first set them up because they got too close to the exhaust. So I had to jury rig it with zip ties at the bottom. There doesn't seem to be a good mount point on this bike. I bought one of those adapter things to try to find another place to put a mount strap, but like the foot peg mount isn't good, and everything else down here is too sharp, or interferes with the brake lever, or it's too close to the exhaust. So there's no good place to mount the 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 strap. Where do you put it down here? Like it seems like there's places. No, this is plastic. You can't put it here. This is where I had it. It's in the exhaust. That's where it burned off. Down here is too sharp. Down here is too sharp. Down here it's going to interfere with the brake lever, or it'll wear on this. You can't get down there. These holes are too recessed. So if you want to stick one of those the metal mounts in there, and this would be a terrible place anyway, so maybe right here if you built it out, I guess, but then it would scratch on your leg. So you can't build anything out here. So it almost has to be back here. I guess I could mount it. I hate to mess with the brake cylinder. So maybe you could reuse one of these, but like these bolts apparently are sacrificial bolts. You only torque them once, so you have to buy a new sacrificial bolt, and then I don't know. Anyway, what else? So I got this Apache Harbor Freight. This is a 2800 top box. It's mounted on a Bikerzbits rack. This is the tie rack, the cheap one. I think it's the Honda factory one or whatever, but it's fine. I just drilled holes in it with some U-bolts. Super, super cheap. I love having top boxes. You know, I put a padlock on the back, and I can keep my camera and stuff in here if I, the GoPro or whatever, if I go into a gas station or something. So, you know, a lot of people just put like really nice camera equipment in here. I don't carry nice camera equipment, but, you know, just having someplace I can lock stuff. I just like the utility of, you know, between the tank bag, having some stuff that I can quickly access, and this, you just pop the latches and whatever, rather than dealing with like, oh, I got to unroll a million things to get it. There's just that little bit of, I got to unroll 47 layers of flap to get into something waterproof. I don't know, mentally, like this, I love having a little top case. It doesn't weigh that much. It was really, really cheap. So this is a thumbs up. And then this net, which actually makes it more annoying to get into, but this is just one of these cargo nets with the plastic ends. This is actually really nice because it's just a good stash spot. Like, I guess this is what you get out of the beaver tail and the Moscow luggage. But the stash spot is nice because whether it's like, oh, I need, you know, my rain gear quickly accessible to take on and off, or, oh, I need to shed a layer or something and put that in there. And also like laundry, I do road laundry now to try to save weight. And so if your clothes haven't dried overnight, you can put them in a mesh bag and stick them under there, and then they'll bake in the sun and dry. So, this setup actually I really like. Overall, I really like the setup. The way it all kind of played out with, you know, what did I put in each place? Like this was basically tools and spares, this was food, this was rain pants, and this was climate stuff, like the left bag here. Rain, cold, heat, like all that kind of stuff. So this is actually pretty light on this side. It's probably not super balanced, but I didn't really notice it. So that packing setup actually worked really well. So I'm really, really happy. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Like, I'm happy with the bike. I'm happy with the packing setup for the most part. Again, just besides this Rackless luggage stuff. Because again, like it'd be so nice to just be able to take something off and throw it over your shoulder into a hotel. And I don't need this stuff in the hotel, but just from a security standpoint, like on the GSA, I'm used to having bags that you can like lock up and just leave if you have some, yes, people can break into them if they really want to, but I wouldn't hesitate to leave my cold weather gear in a locked aluminum pannier. These, it's just a little bit too easy to get into. So that's the setup. You know, if I had it to do over again, what would I change? The rear shock or the spring rate is terrible. It is a pogo stick. I am not one of these, like, you know, despite having had many, many bikes over the years, I'm not like a suspension snob. I've never been. You know, I'll mess with preload sometimes, but it's not something I think about usually on bikes. And in the newer BMWs that you just sort of set whatever your ride modes and stuff. So it's not something I thought about much, honestly, despite many, many, many miles of riding. And the suspension mattering a lot, it's just not something I thought about. And maybe it's just because I've always had bikes that were fairly well set up from the factory that it just didn't bother me. This is the first bike I've ever had that bothered me. You sit on it and it sinks way down. So I was like, oh, it's nice to be able to touch the ground, but it's not nice. And with obviously like a load, the back end is really, really compressed. And when you go over bumps, especially off-road, the amount of bounce after a bump is crazy. It's like 5 bounces for it to settle. And also it's just like, you know, yes, it's like couch-like sometimes riding down the road where it's like more gentle and it's probably nice on my back, but it's just insane. And so that's something that you know, if I was doing a much longer trip, I would really want to change, which I need to change it. You know, besides that and the luggage, I would love to try to do something with this windscreen. I just don't think that I can. But otherwise, you know, it's the bike has been a dream. I would not hesitate to take this on a much, much longer trip, especially if I didn't have to do a ton of highway. And really the highway limit, honestly, the highway limit is the screen. The highway limit that I found wasn't, I mean, a little bit the saddle, but mostly the screen. The deafening roar is just a bitch, and I don't know what to do about it. You know, I'm honestly tempted to mount like clamp-on winglets on both sides that I can flip around for highway or something like that. Like if I'm not needing to do the full articulation of the bars. If it wasn't for, you know, and again, like, yes, you can only do 70 on the highway, and on highways that are 70 when everyone's doing 80, it is annoying. But, you know, otherwise, like, you know, and I guess, you know, for cold weather riding, you could have a little bit better protection. It's not too bad. You know, last night it got down below 50, but it felt like 30. Actually, it was probably closer to, it was probably actually, by the time I got here, it was probably in the mid 40s. But I've ridden winter for years and years. You know, probably heated grips. I had heated clothing with me. I just didn't feel like hooking it up. So maybe a little bit with that. But like, you know, it is a good all-rounder. And even on like on fun, twisty roads, it was fine. The one thing that I didn't mention, and I think it might have been Ian from Big Rock, or it might have been the Lightweight Adventurers podcast. You have to be willing to use the whole rev range. And it's an 11,000-ish red line. I don't normally ride that way on the GS. Like I never really bother using the top of the range. It just feels like it runs out of steam. That always felt like a good, keep it in the low end and you're happy. I'm not used to having to flog bikes. This, if you keep it in the middle of the rev range, you're good. Like, you know, climbing hills, you got to be willing to work the throttle. You pick the high gear on a, you know, there were a lot of these like curvy mountain roads that I'm doing a climb on the street, and I picked the wrong gear, and it's like, oh shit, I'm in third. I just went around a climbing turn. Bleh. You know, the engine bogs. The engine does not like to bog. It does not tractor well if you pick the wrong gear. So like that kind of thing, you got to be willing to get it. You know, you have to pick the right gear. So it's more, and that makes it more engaging riding, honestly. But like you know, and you have to be willing to run it at 8,000-9,000 if you're going to ride in a sporty way. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's not like anything failed on the bike or whatever by flogging it. Um, it seemed very, very happy to run that way. But if you're used to riding it in like the bottom half of the rev range, you're gonna say it is a relatively lower powered bike, but you don't feel it as much if you're willing to really ride it hard. And that's not something I was actually expecting. Like again, I've never owned a Honda. I didn't know anything about it, so that was unexpected. But once I started doing it, I found a lot more joy in riding the bike hard, and it seemed happy enough to do it. So yes, there were plenty of roads, street roads, where that KTM 690 motor, which I rode in the SMC, I would have loved to have, but I also probably would have got myself into trouble, because that's the other thing about this bike, on road and off road. If you screw up, it is very forgiving. I would love stronger brakes, honestly, like the amount of rear brake that I had to get. Like I'm just used to the front brake grabbing so hard that it just brings you to a stop pretty easily with a little light pull. Like you got to be willing to use both brakes. And yes, like having linked brakes on other bikes or whatever, like you get some of that anyway. But even so, if you're really, really going and you do a really, really quick stop, the brakes are a little bit, with the load and whatnot, you have to be a little bit careful. But overall, you pick the wrong line, it's forgiving. Like you lean it harder, it's forgiving. You screwed up off road, it's forgiving. Like it's very, very forgiving. It'll do what you ask it to do. And if you screw up, it says, "Oh, you screwed up, no big deal," and you keep going. I can't believe in over whatever it was, the whole trip was probably 1,200 miles. Maybe, no, it had to be more than that. Oh God, no. Because I did actually some of this BDR in sections and ride out and back in the top part. So this is probably at least 1,500 miles of riding, maybe 2,000 miles of riding to do the whole thing in the end. Um, I didn't drop it once off road, which, whatever, knock on wood, but like every time I got into a sketchy situation, it just kept going. And there were a couple of times where I was like, oh, that was not great. But it just kept going. And I really, again, I didn't do anything crazy or technical just because I was by myself and wanted to be a conservative, safe rider. But all the sections where something felt like it could have gone wrong, it just didn't go wrong. Or I was about to lose it and it didn't. And it held on. And so, even in like sketchy downhills and stuff, in terrorist gravel, there was this one section in section one of the ride, which was like a mile of really, really tricky downhill gravel. For me anyway, tricky. It was fine. It took your attention to get through it, but it was fine. So, yeah, I don't know if there's that much else to say. I mean, I think like people kept coming up to me saying, "Oh my God, is that the 300 Rally?" Because they're kind of a unicorn out there, in a way that like people know it is a bit of a unicorn bike. Obviously, it's a famous bike, but they're really, really hard to get a hold of. I saw one other one on the trip, which was like, wow, like seeing a unicorn. I saw a lot of other adventure bikes out there. I think, if you get one, you'll be happy with it if you understand what you're getting. It is not a 500, 600 class bike. And there's good things about that with it's low weight. You get your Honda reliability. I'm 5'8". You can reach the ground. Part of that is because of the suspension being so soft. Rally Raid in their Stage 1 kit keeps the stock ride height, so that's probably the way that I would go to change the suspension. Yeah, so as long as you know what you're getting, I think you'll be really happy. Great around town bike, great for hauling a load. Reasonable enough for this class on the highway. I don't know that any other 300 is going to be any better on the highway. And again, like if there was a little bit I could do about the wind, I wouldn't. I rode it 400 miles at 70 miles an hour yesterday, and besides ringing in my ears and a little bit of a sore butt, like, I would do it again. So, hope that was useful. You know, someone asked me, you know, well, what's next? What are you going to do? I'm going to try some more technical riding. I'm thinking about maybe the PA Wilds BDR. Maybe that's a bit more than I can chew, or maybe even doing some of the expert sections up on I think section 7. There were 2 expert sections that I skipped. Considering I didn't even drop the bike once, I feel like I should at least get into something a little bit tricky and maybe drop the bike once. Maybe I'm asking for trouble doing that, but you know, now that I've gotten a long off-road trip, long-ish off-road trip, I did it, you know, a couple sections I did it basically in 3 sections. There was one section that I did that was 2 days, one section I did out and back over 3 days, and then the last section, which was the last 3 sections, I did over basically like a 4-day ride, 5-day ride, whatever the heck it was. This is, besides a couple of little things I would change in my packing, I could live off this bike for months and months. I could, you know, I could ride it across the country, ride it around the world, whatever. It's fine. And it's, at this point, it's a good bike to choose for that. I've got a Tenere 700 on the way, so anxious to compare that and see. I would not have done this ride on the GSA by myself. I would have done it with somebody else on the GSA, because then I saw other GSAs out there. It would have been fun. Some of the sections, there was a section that goes up to the Appalachian Trail somewhere, I believe in Virginia, that was a 4,000 foot peak. The climb to that was tricky for me. I would have really struggled with that. I think on the GSA, the bike could have done it. I don't know that my skill level could have done it. And if something had gone wrong, it would have been really bad at that spot. It was a drop off and it was very steep, and the bike would have probably dumped going the wrong direction and would have been really hard to pick up. I didn't worry about it on this. If something had gone wrong, it would have been easy to solve. So it'll be interesting to see how the T7 is. I don't think the T7's wind management is any better than this one, so I don't know. Be interesting to see. You know, I plan on doing the TAT next year. I feel like now I have the confidence to do it after doing this trip. I don't have bike worries really. The only thing honestly that I have on for TAT is I have alone in the wilderness worries, which has nothing to do with the bike. I mean, having a Japanese bike I think is a leg up on some of that. Carrying a satellite tracker is nice, but there is a lot of alone in the woods kind of stuff that you know, whatever. But in terms of the bike itself, I almost get hit by that bird. In terms of the bike itself, I would take this on any terrain. I would take it across the country, off-road. I would do whatever with it. It's great. If I do decide to take this in the TAT, and it's going to be interesting whether I do this or the T7, if I take this, I got to figure out. I mean, the wind management doesn't really matter for off-road rides. That didn't bother me besides the street stuff or the interstate stuff, which I wouldn't be doing much of. The seat probably doesn't bother me because there's a lot more standing. The off-road days, the seat didn't bother me. It was just these interstate days. I would do the suspension. I got to do the suspension if I'm going to take this on a really long trip. You know, I would do the Northeast BDR for sure on this. That's supposed to be very tricky, so that would be interesting. Yeah. I guess maybe one other thing to mention was water management. That was really tricky. And fuel management, I guess I should mention, you know, 3.2 gallon tank, and it's funny because I couldn't remember whether it was 3.2 or 2.3. And so I kept filling up thinking it was 2.3, and I'm pretty sure it's 3.2, which meant I was filling up way more often than I needed to. Except the gauge gets to red with a gallon left, and at 60 miles a gallon, the gauge is red at a third of your fuel, which is psychologically, it was hard to get over. I think I need to run it almost to empty and maybe carry some spare fuel just to have the confidence of knowing that I had that available. I'm just trying to think like, yeah, but so, I mean, you wouldn't really need to carry spare fuel for pretty much anything that I did. I have one of these fuel holsters, but I have water in it. So that's, the other thing is water. I don't like riding with stuff on my back. I tried it. Also, there's not enough room here, so I carried a Camelback in the tank bag with a hose. I realized I don't drink moving. So since I don't drink moving, then I have my hands free when I stop to drink. So and I just hate the taste of water that comes out of water bladders and stuff like that. I just like bottles. So put an insulated bottle in here and 2 bottles in here and a spare bottle back here, which is 1, 2, 3, 4 liters of water, which is more than what I would have had in the Camelback anyway. And I think I would do that again, and probably on, if I was doing long desert sections or something like that, I would probably just buy, I would probably put in insulated bottles. I'd probably fill 2 insulated bottles with ice and put them up there or something, and then just take spare water and jam it maybe in here, or just jam it under this or whatever if I was doing hot desert sections, just in case I got into trouble. But otherwise, I think I'm done with bladders for that kind of thing. Like when I did the off-road class, and it was nice. There was a lot of, I didn't have a tank bag either. So if you're not running a tank bag and you don't have something behind you, having water on your back is fine. And it didn't bother me on that kind of riding, but there was, for the kind of riding that I normally do, it's actually in the way, and it puts pressure on my shoulders, and like that kind of fatigue gets to you. And so trying to minimize fatigue and do it, like I like to do long days. I try to not do days that are less than, say, 8 to 10 hours really of riding. So 8 to 10 hours with the backpack on that's heavy with full of water and stuff. It's just fatigue I don't need when there's other ways to do it, and I would rather carry that weight on the bike than on myself. So if you're thinking about the Mid-Atlantic BDR, I highly recommend it, especially in autumn. It was freaking awesome. If you catch the top around the Tioga State Forest, you can basically run the wave of autumn all the way down, and it was a dream. It was just a dream. I picked the right couple of days. Doing it solo as a fairly novice person, I would not do it solo as a novice on the 1200. Solo on this as a novice was totally fine. That was a great route, and it's the easiest BDR, so it's a great way to sort of dip your toes in. You can kind of choose your own adventure around the technical parts of it. So yeah, that was that. I couldn't have asked for more on that. I guess that's about it. Yeah, if you're thinking about this bike, if you're a speed demon, you'll hate it. If you're a suspension snob, you'll hate it, but you'll fix that anyway because you know more about suspension than most people. It's a great platform, and it's really cheap overall. Like for whatever it was, $6,800. And I've had many expensive motorcycles. I had just as much fun, probably more fun on this thing than I would have had on the 1200 for what I was doing. However, I just rode 7,000 miles across the country on a very long trip on the GSA. I would not do this on that trip on this in a million years. The GSA was perfect and it was worth the money. But for this kind of thing, and like, yes, the KTM, which at some point I'm sure I will own the KTM 690 and I'm sure I will love it. But again, me having the lower skill level, I don't need it yet. And 2, my main problem on these rides of being essentially just lost in the woods and alone and broken down. I know the KTM, the 690 probably is on the higher level of reliability, is my understanding. But high compression engine, premium gas, and question mark reliability by yourself on long woodsy trips with no cell service. That's the limit for me on that. And yeah, sure, it's also twice the price of this thing. But in terms of the platform, obviously, I think that would have been probably more fun, and the street sections probably would have been more fun to rip around because that motor is a dream. But otherwise, I don't know, jack of all trades, the little engine that could. Some people call it the Red Rooster. Hope that was helpful. Hopefully this video actually recorded, and if it didn't, I'm gonna be so bummed. Catch you later.